The Airplane Alphabet Book by Jerry Pollatta, Fred Stillwell, and Rob Bolster. Anybody in our family like to fly? The Airplane Alphabet Book. The ability to fly is one of mankind's greatest achievements. For thousands of years, people have watched birds and wondered what it would be like to fly and see the earth from above. People wish they could magically travel long distance in a short time, or go over mountains without climbing, or crossing oceans without sailing on a long voyage. Many clever people attempted to fly in various contraptions over the years. Some tried balloons and some tried gliders. Finally, on December 17th of 1903, in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, Wilbur and Orville Wright flew the first airplane. Since the invention of the airplanes, people can now fly. A is for AT-6, the aviation trainer. 6 is an important airplane because it was used to train thousands of pilots all over the world. Receiving a pilot's license is still a wonderful accomplishment. And that looks a lot like the trainers Aunt Holly and Uncle Chaz used. Grandpa did not fly things like this. He just flew little airplanes. B. B is for B-17. If you ever see the airplane with the letter B in its name, it means bomber. The B-17 was used in World War II to help the Allies win the war. This American plane was also called the Flying Fortress, and it usually flew with a crew of 10 people. C. C is for China Clipper. The China Clipper was a flying boat. In the early years of passenger, flying businessmen and famous people wanted to fly to faraway places. Many of these countries, such as China and India, did not have airports or runways. Who needs a runway when you could land in a harbor? D is for Dauntless. The ever-increasing speed of airplanes created a new problem: how to stop. Flaps were invented. The flaps slow a plane down when it is diving or coming in for a landing. The Dauntless has something new in its design: Swiss cheese flaps. I guess it must have lots of holes in it. E. E is for Electra. The Electra has 2 tails. In wind tunnel tests, engineers figured out that this plane would go out of control in certain situations if it only had 1 tail. So it was redesigned with 2. F. F is for Ford Trimotor. This airplane has 3 engines. It was a popular plane for exploration because 3 engines are safer than 1 or 2. In 1929, a Ford Trimotor with skis instead of wheels was the first airplane to fly over the South Pole. G. G is for Goonie Bird. This airplane was a DC-3, a Douglas Commercial 3. At one time, this airplane carried 9 out of every 10 air passengers in the United States. The Goonie Bird's other nickname was Skytrain. So, in St. Louis, the Douglas Corporation that made this plane and the McDonnell Corporation merged to become McDonnell Douglas. And then a few years later, the Boeing Company bought it. So that's a St. Louis-based company. And lots of people in the St. Louis area have worked and made airplanes. H is for Hercules Flying Boat. This huge all-wood cargo plane is also called the Spruce Goose. It only flew once, but it still holds the record for having the longest wingspan of any airplane ever built. And I went and saw that with Grandma and Grandpa when I was 10, out in California someplace. At one time, Some engineers thought there would never be a metal airplane. Those pessimists were wrong. Today's planes and jets are made with strong, lightweight metal such as aluminum and titanium. I. I is for invader. This warbird was usually painted black, so it would be difficult to see during nighttime missions. Flying at night in terrible weather posed many problems. Instruments were invented: the directional gyro, the radar, the fuel gauge, the transponder, the altimeter, the airspeed indicator, the artificial horizon, the turn coordinator, and the vertical speed indicator. These instruments, along with a clock and a compass, allow pilots to fly safely without looking out the window. Grandpa does not have an instrument rating. He can only fly when he can see the ground. If it's foggy or something, he can't go up. But Aunt Holly and Uncle Chaz are instrument rated, so they can fly even when they're in the middle of the clouds, because they know how to just concentrate on their instruments. Good thing. J. J is for Jenny. The Jenny was a barnstorming plane. Huge crowds would come from miles around to see these traveling air shows. Barnstormer pilots earn their pay by doing wild stunts such as walking on the wings, driving at the crowd, and flying loop-de-loops. Don't try this at home. K. Most airplanes have a propeller in the front. The propeller pulls the airplane and blows air over the wings. Each wing is shaped so that the air travels faster over the top than under the bottom of the wing. This causes lift. The wings of birds are shaped the same way. K is for Kyushu. This plane has a propeller on its tail. L is for lightning. This famous airplane has a very unique design. It has one pilot, but it has two engines and two fuselages. The fuselage is the body of the plane, and the cockpit is where the pilot sits. M. M is for Messerschmitt. These planes are looking for a dogfight. A dogfight is an aerial battle between two or more fighter planes while flying close to each other. The Messerschmitt was a German fighter plane in World War II. It was common for fighter planes to fly in a V formation. N. N is for Navy duck. The seaplane does not quack, but it can take off from and land on the water. Instead of wheels, some planes have pontoons. A pontoon is a float that is attached to the airplane. O. O is for Osprey. It is a helicopter, an airplane, a jet with propeller, or is it all three? The aircraft's radical design was developed so that it could take off vertically. Maybe it should not be an airplane book, you decide. What are you reading this book? Some men and women are busy in the control tower, directing air traffic. P is for Piper Cup, and this is more like the airplanes that Grandpa flies. Today, almost everyone can fly a plane if they work hard. Go to a flight school and get a license. Many people fly single-engine airplanes called Cubs. They may fly to work in another state, take a friend on a long ride, or just go sightseeing. Usually, Grandpa just went sightseeing. Sometimes we flew to other places. Q. Q is for Queen Air. There is a passenger airplane called the Queen Air, but there is a more important Q. Q is for question mark. In 1929, aviation history was made when an airplane, an Atlantic 2C airplane, named the question mark, flew nonstop for more than 4 days. It never ran out of gas because it was refueled in flight. Pilots jokingly call this passing gas. Oops. Oh no, a plane has crashed. Is anyone hurt? Did the pilot survive? Where are the passengers? Did it crash into anyone's house? We're sorry about the crash, but there's nothing to worry. It was only a remote-controlled model airplane. Building and flying model airplanes is a hobby. R. R is for Ryan. In May 1927, Charles Lindbergh was the first person to fly a solo, nonstop flight across the Atlantic Ocean. It was a remarkable feat, and he was an instant hero. He named his plane the Spirit of St. Louis. Look closely at the design of this Ryan airplane. It doesn't have a front window. Every inch of extra space was used to store fuel. And you can see a replica of this at the St. Louis airport, or you can see the original at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. S. S is for Spitfire. What a great name. Spitfire, Spitfire. Don't you just love saying it? The British fell in love with this airplane. Its ellipse wings made it maneuver slightly better than the Messerschmitt, and eventually it ruled the skies over Europe in World War II. The aircraft carrier version was called the Seafire. T. T is for triplane. Engineers thought they could get just as much lift with 3 short wings as they could with 1 long one. They were right. The triplane did not fly as fast as a bi-wing or a monowing, but it did have an advantage. The short wings made it easier to store in a hangar. A hangar is a garage for an airplane. U. U is for ultralight. Have you ever seen these tiny airplanes fly over your neighborhood? They sound like a giant bumblebee. Flying in ultralight is as close as you get to being a bird. V. V is for Vega. The Vega is a type of airplane that Amelia Earhart flew. In the early years of flying, not many women were pilots, and Amelia Earhart was the first woman to fly solo nonstop across the United States. She was also the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. In 1937, Amelia Earhart disappeared over the Pacific Ocean in an Electra while trying to fly around the world. They're still hunting for her. They think they have found her airplane on an island out in the Pacific Ocean, but they're still not completely sure. W. W is for Wright Flower. The Wright brothers' 12-second flight made history because they accomplished 3 things at once. They flew a heavier-than-air craft, the plane became airborne under its own power, and Orville controlled the aircraft. Wilbur and Orville Wright would be proud to know that the only 66 years later, an astronaut, Neil Armstrong, bought a piece of the original Wright Flyer to the moon and back. X. X is for Zingu. Zingu is a Brazilian twin-air 6-seater that is used to transport VIP. Very important, people. Whenever you see the initial X on the name of an aircraft, it usually means experimental. Y. Y is for yak. No, not the animal, the airplane. This Russian plane was named after Alexander Yakovlev, the man who designed it. It's much easier to call it a yak, or a yakety yak. Maybe you'll go to college, study aerodynamics, and design a plane someday. Z. Z is for Zero. During World War II, Americans had nicknames for enemy aircraft. The nickname made it easier to identify the planes. Zero is the nickname of the Mitsubishi A6M fighter plane. There are a zillion other airplane nicknames, such as Barbara, Jill, Liz, Kate, and Nick. The big sun on the airplane looks like a big zero. This is what does that strange sound? Look up. There's a flying machine that has no propeller. How could that be? What is it? Whatever it is, a new age. Jets. Be smart. Read a zillion books. Maybe not a zillion, but last year Grandma read you 100 books and 100 poems. And I'm going to read you 100 math books And I'm going to read you 100 chapters of Clancy's Hollings fun books. And I have about 30 ABC books.